as we bring in Adam Terry here. Like that's up there, Adam. You've seen a lot of games in that building. That's got to be high on the list of games you've been at.
Well, for me personally, in attendance at anyone, I think that's the best game I've ever seen for Syracuse, right? Like, it was, I'm up there, packing stuff up. We're down 21-0, and you think you're going to get blown out of the water, and then all of a sudden you start to see the resiliency of this team, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, we got a game. Oh, okay, we win this game. And, the fans were electric. The play out on the field was superb, and you're just in a situation where, I walked out of that thing and, you would have thought we've been a football town for a long time, because it just brought everybody into this realm of just, everybody's excited again. So Fran is a dynamic person. His personality permeates, his toughness permeates back through the ranks, and those guys went out there and played a hell of a game, and it was led by Kyle McCord. And what other person to throw the kudos to is just a guy like that.
Yeah, McCord is outstanding. He throws for 380. Obviously, on the same day, Ohio State goes down to Michigan, which is a storyline lost on nobody. And you know what I find interesting here? It wasn't upset, yes. In some upsets, I go back to the Clemson game in 2017, Adam. Syracuse won the game. It wasn't a fluke they won that game, but you could tell they were fighting uphill to scratch and claw that game the whole way. This game, once the Orange got rolling, I'm like, they're the better team, at least on Saturday. That wasn't a fluke, right? Syracuse was the better football team out there.
Yeah, it's the first time that you match up against a top 16 or a top 10 team, and you're like, okay, when you stood on the field prior to the game, you're like, okay, they still have a little bit different, but we're closing that gap on this arms race. And I think when I step back, the only thing that I saw out of Miami is that some of those young freshmen were game ready. And what do I mean by game ready? We've put freshmen in the game, but they might need to add 10, 15 pounds, something like that. And They've gone out and they've played early. But, you look at their corners and, everybody's 6'1", 6'3", 185 to 210, right? So, some of those guys were game ready, where you look at our squad, now we've got the height, we're starting to get the size, and it's just the difference in that next step is, can you get a couple young freshmen, highly regarded guys to get in there and play right away and push some of these veteran guys? And we're starting to see that for Syracuse. But, that's 12 games into a season. But, the closing of the arms race in that one, I think you like what Fran's doing. You like that he's developing talent, and now it's the first year. How many kids jump into a portal, so on and so forth.
We'll start finding out that officially Sunday night into Monday morning, and learn the bowl game in all of that. As we advance ahead here, Adam, too, the bowl game, I assume all the bowl people are listening as I try to book Colorado and Syracuse, because I just think that would be a wildly entertaining game. How important is the bowl game here as far as, stature of who you get picked, opponent, and then I guess what it leads to of who actually ends up, playing in this game for Syracuse?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest thing is who's going to play. We've seen in the past that 2018 year where we had a couple transfers that were able to play right away. So that was pretty cool. But now you're in a situation where who are going to be the guys, right? Is Kyle McCord going to play? I would say most of our guys are going to play. Who on the other team is going to play? What the biggest thing for this is even if guys don't play, it's a development opportunity of those next 15 practices to get young guys or guys that transferred in the portal, and now you have this expectation of okay, you're a sophomore, you got a couple of years left. Next year's your year, you got to get ready. So that's where the big thing about this bowl game is, because it's it's crapshoot. You don't know who's going to get in there and who's going to declare or who's going to stay and all these different things. So the biggest thing for Syracuse is you got to kind of throw caution to the wind and see who's going to play. And then also you've got to make sure that this next level of talent gets developed, because it's it's a tough schedule next year.
Tennessee, which is hanging out there for basketball tomorrow night, is hanging out there for the Cuse to open next season down in Atlanta. We all know that's going to be an incredibly tough game for whoever's playing starting, and certainly at the quarterback spot. We know it won't be McCord next year. I guess that's what the weird thing about the big picture, right? Like, you'd love to play McCord and celebrate him and have him go out. You can understand the reasons why he wouldn't play. Like, if you're a Fran Brown, what's more beneficial to Fran? Rolling out there with Kyle again and, like, having another big game with this guy? Or being like, all right, let's get the Jakari Williams or something like that experience on a big stage? What makes more sense, do you think, for the program big picture?
Well, I mean, selfishly, you want to see the program go 10-3 and have a fantastic year and ride off into the sunset, create more records for Kyle. But it's that changing of the guard. Do they have that personnel inside the locker room right now, or are they going to have to do the same thing and go and look and see where it is? So it's kind of one of those where it's love to see Kyle play, but then also, do you have that next quarterback in waiting, or are you going to have to go out and find somebody like they did with Kyle? The hard part about something like that is there's not a lot of Kyle McCords floating around with a one-loss team from the year prior.
No, and we look at Saturday's game, I'd say, like, the two portal quarterbacks from last year that played the best this year, they were both in the field on Saturday. There's not many of those guys out there that have that level of success. I was so impressed the way I get the quarterbacks aren't playing against each other, but at the same time, like, Cam Ward had a fantastic game, right? Like, he's dealing from the start, and McCord was able to outduel that by the end of the game.
Yeah, it was it was impressive. I mean, I've sent out a text to the Senior Bowl, and they got the invite out to Cam Ward, I think, last week or the week before, and I'm sitting there saying, oh, well, you got Kyle McCord too. You better get him on the radar pretty soon. So it was a fantastic look. Hands down, if you weren't at that game, you missed a fantastic opportunity to. You can watch it on TV, but that place was rocking. You've got the wave going on. I haven't seen one of those in years, and even if they were doing it, there were probably spots and blank spots in the wave. So, you just saw that, and you saw the dynamic nature of what it was. You had Miami fans there.
Yeah.
So it got even louder that Syracuse was able to change that volume and the decibel level because there were other people in there. It just wasn't all Cuse fans. So that, my son was there, and he had some buddies there. Like, it was an amazing game, right? Like, you walk away from it, and I have nothing else to say of, like, that's one of the best games I've ever seen in my life. And I've watched a lot of ball and been part of a lot of football, but that one definitely number one in Syracuse that I've seen. And I played in the overtimes against, like, the Virginia Tech, and you saw the Freeney five sack game and all these different things. And this was just like, it was cool because you were playing a meaningful game, and then it was even better because you went out and you did what you've been talking about you can do, and then you come and you culminate that thing with a victory, and the fans rushing the field. The hard part about that was I would have loved to even seen it with the students.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that would have been crazy. That place would have been bonkers with the student section.
Yeah, that's what's too bad with it being on Thanksgiving weekend and then I'm not being back with the tickets and the whole thing in mass yet, which is it's disappointing because there's your sellout. There's pandemonium on the field after. If that's the case, I'd say, realistically, you played in a bunch of these games here, Adam, but like post McNabb, the only game you could even remotely put in the conversation with that one is the Clemson game in 2017, unless you got some. Your Virginia Tech win was really good, but like those two seem historic here at this point.
Yeah, it was done by the quarterback play. You look back and you say, how was the Clemson job able to be accomplished? You played solid defense, and the quarterbacks, go around and start slinging it around. And, this one was offensive line played well. That was my first thing is like, hey, one, can you pass protect, and can you stop the run? That's always what you fear going into a game, especially with our history of not being able to stop the run and then, getting beat up in pass pro. But you look at it and, one, Kyle McCord makes the offensive line better because that ball comes out quick. And then you had the defense, and those guys in the defensive line were really stepping up in order to we didn't get a lot of action towards the quarterback, but when it did, it really disrupted.
Adam Terry with us. Adam, you mentioned your son was there, and I bring this up because your son was one of, if I have this correct, like more than 300 recruits at the game, and he is a large offensive lineman, much like yourself. Best you can, or whatever you're allowed to reveal. What is the getting recruited by Fran Brown experience like so far for the Terry clan?
It's really in its infancy here, but it's just one where you look at what Fran talks about and what he's, I'm on the plane rides, I'm behind the scenes, not all the time, but just in the general sense of what he talks about is who he is. So it's, talking the talk, but he walks the walk as well. And, at the beginning of the season, you're sitting there going, oh, okay, here's another guy that's talking about this, he's talking about that. But the way that, look, I've never seen a head coach talk so much shit to the other side. Right, like I was impressed by that. I was like, okay, you're yelling across the field right now to Miami. I was like, okay, all right, can we back it up? And sure as heck, that's kind of what accomplished was guys believing in what they're doing and being held accountable. And there were great plays, there were not so great plays, but it just kept going. And the sideline really got involved. The guys that weren't playing were all engaged. So. With Fran, it's just what you see is what you get, and it's raw, it's untethered. You don't know what's going to be said, but you just love it because that's real. Like that's what it's going to be, and that's how it's. Look, I play with a guy like Ray Lewis, and Ray was one of those guys that really, if you didn't believe by the time that you left, then you were never going to. And if you did, you just ratcheted that thing up tenfold. And I think that's what I see in the demeanor of Fran Brown.
How well, Adam, do you notice that, pardon me, relating to, you said, your son's getting recruited, but the idea of, he's relating to these 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22-year-olds. He's 41 years old right now, so he's a year younger than we are. He's relating to these guys in a way that I've never quite seen it before, at this level. It feels like he's old school, but it feels very modern at the same time. It's very unique, isn't it, to watch him go about this?
Yeah, and that's kind of what it is having a conversation, dapping up some of these young kids. And like I tell my son and, a couple other kids were there from his high school and, being able to be down there in that atmosphere. One, that place was chaos on the sideline, not in a bad way, but in a very good way. I bet Pete Sala was losing a little bit more hair on that one, but it was just, it was. Everybody was there. Everybody was into it. You didn't have, I've seen this in the past where families are just kind of sitting on the bench and it's nonchalant. Like everybody was engaged, the whole coaching staff, the way that they go about it was fun to watch. And then, being able to relate to the kid, my son's still 15, right? He's a young kid still. And, the conversations were just, pure energy, hey man, we want to do this, you want blah, 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 blah. And you're like, oh, okay. All right. He just pumped that kid up. And, it's one of those where I think the biggest thing that I see out of Fran is, when he speaks to you, the most important person in the room, and he's going to take you for a ride if you want to go along with it.
How important, there was obviously, lots of, the class of 2025 is almost done, but I'm sure there were guys there that might flip, and signing day is Wednesday. There were a bunch of years there. How immediate impact do you think a game like that can have when you look at literally guys were there that might change their mind and sign with Syracuse in less than a week here? This could have literally immediate dividends for the future roster of this team.
Well, I think the biggest thing is how many of those kids were there to watch Miami, right? It's a weird statement, but I remember when I went down to Pitt versus Notre Dame, and I went down to watch Notre Dame, right? I was the Pitt recruit, and it was the last game at Pitt Stadium. But I was watching, and I was sitting there, and I was like, oh wow, Notre Dame, blah 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 blah. Like, how many of these kids on the sideline were rooting, not necessarily rooting, but like, hey, that's the U. They're on their way back. Mario Cristobal's doing this, and then all of a sudden, this wave of pure energy and get after it was, oh man, like, I can play here. Like, this is cool. Like, I like this. It's the dome, and it might be a little bit chilly outside, but like the way that this energy is, you're not gonna play at Hard Rock and get that type of energy. I'm sorry, it's not gonna happen.
No.
But if you go into the dome, you're gonna get that energy, and people are gonna get after it, and you could tell that the defense, especially when some of these big plays occurred or a big stop, they were feeding off the energy. So it was. I said it pregame, and I might have said it with you last time, but it's like, hey, this was the first time in a long time that I've the moniker of like, hey, it's the Loud House. Well, now it happened once. Can you start repeating it? And it's the old thing especially for Syracuse. If you build it, will they come? Right? Like, will they be there? And I think at that game, it's getting closer. It's definitely getting closer. I think it's piquing the interest of everybody. And, some of the old souls out there that are like, this, that, and the other thing, you can't take that away. Like, what they just did this season was monumental.
I'd say you mentioned Hard Rock. It's not that wild down there. It's not like the old Orange Bowl, though. When we were down there, whatever that was, I did get off the elevator at the wrong place, I guess, and I was accidentally in a nightclub. Like, things happen there that can't happen here. But you just never what? Like, where am I? I thought isn't our booth? I'm like, what? Oh, they're like, oh yeah, just go through this door. I'm like, what? What just happened? Last thought for you, Adam. I look at this game and. I keep going back to the Clemson game for this reason. Because, like, at the time, like, Virginia Tech in 16, the Clemson game in 17, 10 wins in 18, it felt like it had changed, right? And then we found out that it hadn't. How much do you think, like, is yesterday or Saturday, is that the day we're looking back on if it does take off here in 5-10 years? Do you think that is the igniter moment if it does go the right way?
Yeah, no, hands down. I think what that game was is, we're only as good as your last game. So, especially in this scenario, you go out of it and you look at the season and you're like, wow, man, that was, you put the right people in place and you were able to build it. But if it does change that program around, you are going to go back to that specific day because, like you said, you might slip a few recruits that are there that day. And you might get a recruit that, he might go somewhere else and then hits the transfer portal in a year or two. And the thing that sticks in his memory was that game, right? Like, hey, I remember I was watching that game. And, the biggest thing right now moving forward is, as everything, it's portal, it's continuity, it's this, it's that. But, it's all in a situation of just, you got to keep building. And who knows where that'll lead you.
Well, it's been a wildly exciting year one. We'll see. We'll find out Sunday where the bowl game is and all that good stuff, and we'll find out in the years to come where it comes. Because, hey, if it leads to that, this game's going to be remembered even higher and higher, I think, historically, if it does turn into something down the line. All right, man, great to have you every Monday all season. I'm sure we'll touch base when we find out when the bowl game is and we get closer to that game. But thanks as always, and we'll talk probably in a few weeks.
All right, sounds good, man.
There he is, our guy, Adam Terry. Always glad to have Adam here on Mondays. And Adam said it, like, Adam played 4 years in that building. He was here 5 years. He was a redshirt. He played in, was it one of the best games? We'll get to this later. I still have that Virginia Tech 0-2 game, like top 10 all time in the Dome. It was a fantastic game because of the game. Like, Virginia Tech was top 10 and all this stuff. It was a fantastic game. But, that's all it was. It was that day, and, you move on. Like, this was a game that it could be something. We don't know. But if Fran hits in 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever, we're going to be looking back to Saturday and remember that game like as, okay, that was the day. That was the day. Hopefully it is the day. We thought Clemson might have been the day. It wasn't. It was a day. It was a great day, but it wasn't the day. We'll find out sometime if Saturday was the day. All right, let's hit a break in this hour. Brought to you by William Matar. Phone line's open for us the rest of the way at 315-437-7644 for ESPN 44. We're back after this here on Q Sports Talk and ESPN Radio.